We're going to start today with pumpkin pie, and we're going to be making one that is a crustless pumpkin pie. And before you throw it out, like the baby with the bathwater, give it a try.
Welcome to Ridgehaven Homestead. From the mountains of Upper East Tennessee, we share snippets of our off-grid life, cabin build, and garden blessings. Pour yourself a cup of tea, sit back, and take a peek into our off-grid home and family.
Friends, welcome back to our off-grid homestead. Counting today, I count 5 Mondays before Thanksgiving. So I thought it would be a lot of fun to share with you some of the recipes that we generally make on Thanksgiving. We eat plant-based, and we have for many years, and so we do that for our health for no other reason than that. So I have on my list several things that we're going to be making over the next few weeks. We're going to start today with pumpkin pie, and we're going to be making one that is a crustless pumpkin pie. And before you throw it out, like the baby with the bathwater, give it a try. It is so good. I was really skeptical about it, but one of my friends at a potluck said, you have to try the Impossible Pumpkin Pie. And I was like, whatever. It took me a while, maybe several weeks or months or a year. I don't even remember. But on a whim one day, I looked it up and I'm like, okay, I'll try it just because she asked me to. And we were sold. Our whole family was sold. And you don't even miss the crust. And I really, really like the crust on a pumpkin pie. But this is just a different kind of recipe. So we're going to be doing that one first, and then the next one we're going to be making, or somewhere down the line, I don't know which order I'm going to do them in yet, we will make a traditional pumpkin pie, and it will be vegan, and it will be delicious because we don't like to eat food that's gross. So we're going to have the crustless pumpkin pie, we're going to have a regular pumpkin pie coming up. We are going to make our favorite entree that I ate a lot growing up, but I've made it into a vegan recipe. And that is the mock chicken loaf that my mom and my grandma have always made. It's delicious. We like it a lot anyway. One of those comfort foods. And then I'm going to be making a cranberry sauce. It's a fresh cranberry sauce, really delicious. And I am sold on that one, that I will always make at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I don't know if we're going to be making another one. I feel like there's another couple recipes in there, so just stay tuned and let's join the kitchen, the Homestead kitchen, for today's recipe, which is the crustless pumpkin pie. Hi friends, welcome back to my kitchen. We are going to be making the Impossible Pumpkin Pie, and we're going to find out that it's actually not impossible. I originally got this recipe from the blog Chocolate Covered Katie, and it's been a fabulous recipe, and I have stuck with it without much variation over the years. I would say 6 or 7 years we've been making this faithfully every Thanksgiving, and then sometimes in between. So our ingredients are pretty simple. They're fairly typical of what would normally go into a pumpkin pie, with the exception of we are not going to be having eggs, and we're not going to be having any type of milk. Normally a pumpkin pie is going to take an evaporated milk. This one is super simple, and it is 100% vegan. So the ingredients, let's assemble them together, and then we'll talk about how we're going to put them together. We're going to be using cinnamon, and I happen to have this Saigon cinnamon that I got from Costco. It's a really good quality one. We are also going to be using baking powder, pumpkin pie spice, salt. We are also going to be using a little bit of flour, and for this recipe I am using oat flour because I'm making this gluten-free. For sweetener, we're using maple syrup and then a little bit of stevia powder. Of course, we need pumpkin, and we happen to have some organic pumpkin puree. We are going to be using milk, and I have a little bit of soy milk and also some almond milk. We need a little bit of oil, and today I am using this high oleic sunflower oil. And then the other ingredients that we're going to be using are vanilla and a little bit of ground flax meal, and that is it. So let's go ahead and start putting this recipe together. This will make a standard pie, and today I'm going to rob a little bit out of this pie, and I'm going to make just a wee little pie so that I can pass this along to our oldest son, because it's nice to have some homemade treats for him as well. Okay. Super easy. We've preheated our oven to 400 degrees, and now let's go ahead and assemble this. This is a super easy recipe. I am going to be making it today in a bowl. And so I just have a small bowl. You can use a bigger one. You can also make this in your blender. Many times I will make this in my Vitamix, but I have found that it's almost the same whether I whip it or whether I blend it. So why get my Vitamix dirty when I can just use a bowl? Other handy tools that you might want to use is just a rubber spatula. Okay, so let's get started on this recipe. We've preheated our oven, and now we are going to grease our pan. So I have my greaser thing, and a little bit of oil is all I'm going to do to grease my pan. You can use like Pam or whatever cooking spray that you like. I just like to use this, any kind of oil, and then I can just spread it around with my, I don't even know what this is called, but it's super handy for greasing things. Probably a basting thing. Okay. Next, after we've greased it, we're gonna, in a large bowl, stir together all ingredients. And she recommends putting them in the order that she's listed them, just because it mixes together better, and so I am going to do that. Okay, so first we're gonna do 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. Next ingredient is 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Okay, and then we are going to do 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. I think this might be the Aldi brand. I'm not 100% sure. 1 teaspoon of that. Next, we have 1/2 teaspoon of salt. The salt that I'm using is Himalayan pink salt. I'm using 1/2 teaspoon in there. Next, I have 1/3 cup of flour. And before I do anything else, I'm going to mix those dry ingredients together so that they are well mixed. Okay, next thing we're going to add is our wet ingredients. And the first thing that we're going to be adding is our maple syrup. So for our maple syrup, we're going to be using 1/3 cup. You can also use honey, or you can use a blend of some kind of sugar. I like to use something that has kind of a mapley flavor, like you could possibly use a brown sugar. You might want to adjust your wet ingredients slightly. You could probably even add a golden baking molasses to this. I would not add the blackstrap. That would just be too strong. Okay, now a pinch of uncut stevia. So a pinch of stevia, just a little bit of stevia. This stevia is pretty strong. I'd say I'm adding probably about 1/4 teaspoon. And next comes our pumpkin puree. If you happen to have home canned pumpkin or home cooked pumpkin that's really, cooked down well, you could use that. You could even use butternut squash. This happens to be Libby's organic pumpkin that I got at a co-op. But you could even make this into a sweet potato pie, and that would also be delicious. Just if you're going to use a home canned pumpkin product, make sure that it's really well drained and really well, cooked down so that it's concentrated about to the same consistency of canned pumpkin. And did you know that when they can pumpkin, they do use a blend of squash and pumpkin? It's not generally all pumpkin. Okay, next we're going to add 3/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of some type of milk. So whatever your preferred type of milk, you can make this. Doesn't have to be vegan. You can make it non-vegan. You can use regular whole milk. You can use evaporated milk. I've made this with coconut milk. And when you use coconut milk, it's extra creamy. And so that's really delicious too. I'm going for simple this time and just using the milk we have in the fridge. 1 cup of milk. And then 2 more tablespoons. Okay, so just a note, with me using the almond milk in this recipe, that's going to make a little bit of a lighter version. Honestly, I prefer it to be more rich and creamy, so even using a soy milk will be more creamy, but the coconut milk will make it the most creamy. And so for when it's a holiday, I'm going to use coconut milk. But this is an everyday treat. It's a in the middle of the week treat, and so I'm just using a little bit lighter version, but it will still be really good. Okay, so we've put the pumpkin in and we've put the milk in, and now we can put 2 tablespoons of oil, and that is optional. You can omit the oil and you can just add 2 tablespoons more milk, but it makes it a little bit richer. This time I am adding the safflower or the sunflower oil. I really do like it with coconut milk, but I just didn't want to. I did not want to fiddle with melting the coconut milk. That's the only reason, or the coconut oil. Didn't want to fiddle with doing that this time. Okay, and the last ingredient the last 2 ingredients, we're going to use 2.5 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. And you might have seen me use this vanilla before. It says use 1/4 to 1/2 of what your recipe calls for because this is super concentrated. So I'm not going to be using as much. I'm just going to be using a hint. It's probably about a teaspoon, which will, equal 4 teaspoons, 2 to 4 teaspoons. Okay, and then 1 tablespoon of ground flax meal or 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. And so don't omit these last ingredients. They are listed as optional, but if you want your pie to set up, it's just going to be better to add some type of thickener. I think I've made it with cornstarch and, flax cornstarch in a different recipe, and either one works pretty well. If you're concerned about it looking dark because the flax will leave some dark flecks in it, then go ahead and use the cornstarch. Or arrowroot, whatever you like to use for thickener. Okay, now you just want to whisk it up and make sure that it's smooth. And that is that simple, super duper simple. And the magic about this is it forms its own crust as it bakes. So because of the baking powder in there, this is going to rise. This is going to rise and then it's going to settle. So that's not a mistake. That's just what it's supposed to do. So it doesn't look like a lot of batter, but just trust the process. Okay, so since I have a little bitty bowl here, I have this little baking dish. I'm just going to scoop a little bit in here for Austin's little bitty pie. And the rest of us are just going to have to deal with the fact that we don't get quite as much. That's just part of life. Okay, so there's that. And then put the rest in your baking dish. And remember, this is a greased baking dish. Spread it in there. Give him a little more. Okay, that's all there is to it. And now we are going to let that bake. So we are going to bake this for 35 minutes, and then when we take it out, we are just going to let it set, and then if you have the restraint, which sometimes we don't, if you have the restraint, let it cool completely, and then let it chill in the fridge where it will finish setting up, and then it will get firm and sliceable. It's kind of gooey and soft when you first take it out. So they recommend chilling it or letting it set up for at least 6 hours. That's kind of hard to do. I will tell you that we've taken it out and we've ended up scooping it right out of the pan, but then it's more like pudding and not so much like pie. So if you have the restraint, trust the process. We're gonna keep an eye on it and I'll show you what it looks like as it's going. This has been baking for about 10 minutes, and as you can see in the small pan, it's already starting to rise and puff up nicely. The big pan is taking a bit more because it is just so big, but as you can see, the big pan is starting to make a crust and rise up on the outside, which is exactly what it is supposed to be doing. This will get nice and puffy and fluffy, and then at some point you may be dismayed when you see that it starts to settle a bit. Of course, you want to take all the precautions of not slamming doors, just like you would if you were baking a cake, but this is part of the process of making the impossible pumpkin pie possible. If your impossible pumpkin pie looks kind of ugly when you take it out, that's normal. This one got a little bit dark. I could have taken it out a little bit earlier since it was so small, but it is normal to have these valleys and crevices and canyons. And what you want to take note of is the crust that it has made. So we need to be patient here, and we need to let this sit for at least 6 hours to firm up properly before we cut it.
Well, the best laid plans of mice and men don't always come true, do they? I left for town to leave the pies cooling on the stove, and I had been home alone. Well, in that time when I was gone, the 1 hour or so, someone else came home, saw that little pie, and thought surely it was left for them. So my husband came and he dug into the pie, because who can resist a brand new pumpkin pie sitting on the stove? I mentioned that that pie was reserved for our oldest son, and he didn't even look one bit remorseful, as he said he enjoyed every bit of it. Note to self, next time leave a note.
Okay guys, I want to know, did you try the impossible pumpkin pie? Have you tried it before? Let me know. Until next time, be safe, be well, and God bless.